welcome back to the Rock at Home Summer Edition. Guys, we only have 2 more weeks left of summer. I might cry, I'm so sad. Last week our caption for our contest was Funny Family, and this week our caption is Chalk Walk. So make sure you send in your photos for that. There's only 2 more weeks left until the winners are announced, which I'm so excited about. Now, before we get into our Bible story, I have picked a song for us to sing, and you guys usually refer to this song as the tongue twister song because it has a lot of words and it goes really, really fast. So let's see how well you are at singing I've Got the Joy.
The joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart to stay. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart, down in my heart. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. I've got the peace that passes understanding down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. I've got the peace that passes understanding down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart to stay. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart, down in my heart. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. I've got the wonderful love of my blessed Redeemer way down in the depths of my heart. Where? Down in the depths of my heart. Where? Down in the depths of my heart. I've got the wonderful love of my blessed Redeemer way down in the depths of my heart. Where? Down in the depths of my heart to stay. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart, down in my heart. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart.
Fantastic job, guys. That last verse is really, really hard. There are so many words packed into that. Okay, so now for today's Bible lesson. Today we are learning about possessions and where we should store up our treasure. So in today's lesson, Jesus is speaking to a crowd like he does a lot, and a man calls out to him and says, he says, "Teacher, tell my brother to share our father's inheritance with me." Now, what is an inheritance? Great question. So an inheritance is something that we get from our parents when they die. So it could be money, it could be their house, it could be the things that they owned, but usually the inheritance is given away to someone, and it's usually the person who's died, it's their children who get it. And in Jesus' day, the inheritance almost always went to the oldest son. And so it could have been the money that he had saved up, it could have been his fields and his crops, or the house that he owned, or whatever it was handed down to the oldest son when the parents died. And so this man is telling Jesus asking Jesus to tell his brother to share the inheritance. And of course it's important to share, we all know that, but Jesus knows where this man's heart is at, and he knows that he's being greedy. And so in order to teach him and the crowd a lesson, he decides to tell a parable about where we should store up our treasure. So let's watch the video to find out more about this parable.
Thousands of people came together to listen to Jesus' teachings. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to share our father's inheritance with me." Jesus said, "Watch out and be on guard against all greed. True life is not found in what you own." Then Jesus told the people a parable. A rich man owned land that produced many crops. He didn't have anywhere to store all of his crops, so he said to himself, "I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have so much stored up that I can stop working and relax."
But God told the man, "You are a fool. You will die this very night, and then what good is everything you have stored up?" Jesus told this story as a warning for any person who stores up treasure on earth and is not generous toward God. Then Jesus told his disciples, "Do not worry about your life or your body, what you will eat or what you will wear. Think about the birds. They do not plant or collect grain, yet God feeds them. Aren't you worth more than birds?
Jesus also said, think about the wildflowers. They don't work or make clothing, yet they are lovelier than any king in his fancy clothes. If that is how God takes care of grass, which grows today and is cut down tomorrow, how much more will he do for you? Jesus told his disciples not to worry about food or drink. Seek God's kingdom, he said, and God will provide what you need. God is happy to give his children the kingdom.
Finally, Jesus said, sell your possessions and give to the poor. A thief can take away treasure on earth, but treasure stored in heaven lasts forever. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Jesus is our greatest treasure. Jesus left his place in heaven to live humbly on earth. Jesus obeyed God to set up his kingdom. We can give generously and trust God to provide everything we need.
Okay, wow, there were a lot of important lessons packed into that Bible lesson in that video. So first, God wants us to store up our treasures in heaven, not on earth. So what does that mean exactly? Well, as Christians, what is more important, our time here on earth or our time in heaven? Heaven is so much more important, right? And there's a man named Francis Chan who teaches a really cool object lesson that really helps me understand why heaven is so much more important than earth. So I wanted to use that with you guys today. So we have this piece of string, and I want you to think of this as a timeline, okay? So the very beginning of the string right here is when you were born, or when I was born, the beginning of our life. And then this is our time here on earth, and then this knot is when our time on earth is over and we die. And so look at how short that is. It's such a short amount of time. Then after the knot, if you are a believer and you've accepted Jesus into your life, you spend all of eternity in heaven. And so this time after the knot is heaven, and it just goes on forever and ever and ever and ever, and it just never ends, because we're gonna spend forever, all of eternity in heaven with Jesus, right? Like, this string isn't gonna end, guys, because heaven never ends. It just goes on forever and ever and ever. Okay, back to the beginning. So what is more important, our time on earth or our time in heaven? And if you think about it as this string, this tiny, tiny little amount is nothing in comparison to all of this, right? This is our time here on earth. It may seem like it's really long right now, but it is so, so short compared to our time in heaven. And so what is more important, spending our time, or what is more important, putting effort and putting possessions and putting our treasures into our time here on earth or our time in heaven? I think we would all agree that it's more important to store up our treasures in heaven, right? Because our time here on earth is so, so short. And so what exactly does Jesus mean by storing up treasures in heaven? Because as we learned from the parable, you can't bring anything with you, right? This man had all these crops and he built this great new building to store all of it, and then the next day he died. And all of that didn't matter because he couldn't bring his crops or that new building with him to heaven. He left all of it here on earth. And so what are treasures that we can store up in heaven? Well, our relationship with God, right? It is so important for us to be growing in our relationship with him so that when we get to heaven, we can honor him and glorify him with the life that we lived on earth. And the Bible also talks about how we're going to have crowns that we can give as gifts to Jesus when we get to heaven as well. And that is dependent on how we live our life here on earth. So are we growing in our walk with God? Are we growing in the fruits of the Spirit? Because as Christians, we are supposed to show that we are Christians by showing those fruits. So are we loving? Are we patient? Are we peaceful? Are we kind? Do we have self-control? All of these things. And then also, everyone is going to spend eternity somewhere. And if it's not heaven, then it's hell, right? Because we all deserve hell because of our sin unless we accept Jesus into our life. So another really important thing that we can do here on earth is, we've been talking about this so much, evangelism and teaching others about Jesus, because there may be people in your life who right now they're living their life for here on earth because maybe they don't even believe that heaven is real. And so right now they don't have a relationship with Jesus or with God. So that's why it's so important for us while we're here on earth to be teaching people about Jesus, about his love for us, that he died on the cross. And that is one way that we can store up our treasures in heaven. Now, a couple questions I thought of while I was going through this Bible lesson that I thought maybe you guys would have as well is, does that mean we don't have to work? Can we just sit around doing nothing on earth while we're waiting for our time in heaven? No. We're not allowed to do that. God has still given us responsibilities of things that we need to do. We still need to work. When you guys get older, you'll need to work in order to earn money so that you can afford a house and you can support your family, and also so that you can continue living your life here on earth while telling people about Jesus and growing in your relationship with God and growing in the fruits of the Spirit. And so it is important to keep working, but that is not the most important thing. That's not why we're here on earth. We're not here on earth to work so that we can get lots of money, so we can be rich, so that we can have a big house and a nice car. And that's the important thing, is that number one in our life is God, not our job, not our money or the things that we own. So yes, you still do need to work and you need to glorify God through your work, but it's not the number one most important thing. And the other thing is that we don't need to worry about, am I going to make enough money to survive and to live and to have everything that I need? Remember in the video that Jesus taught the people, you don't need to worry about things. You don't need to worry about tomorrow, because God takes care of the birds and the flowers. And if God cares about little birds and flowers, don't you think he's going to care so much more about us, and he's going to watch out for us and help us and provide everything that we need? So that is an important lesson to remember, is that you don't need to worry about if you're going to have enough, because God will provide for you, and that God also needs to be number one in your life. So another question, is it okay to buy stuff? Like, is it okay to have things? Yes, it is okay to have things, because God has blessed us with different things in our lives. Even if we don't need it, he's given us things that we don't necessarily need, but they are gifts from him, because every good and perfect thing is from God. And so, we may not need a super big house, and we don't need 7 cars and all of these things, but God has blessed us with things that we might not need. He's given us toys, he's given us extra clothes, he's given us maybe a little bit of a bigger house than we need, or maybe your family has 2 vehicles and not just 1. Those aren't bad things. It's okay that God has blessed us with these things, but again, are they number one in your life? Because they shouldn't be. God needs to be number one in your life, and these possessions shouldn't be more important than him. And if he takes these possessions away, we also need to be okay with that, because we still have God in our life. Because you know what? Sometimes we lose our jobs. Sometimes we have to move to a different house. Sometimes our cars break down, or our toys break, or our video games get old and get broken. All of these things might happen. And because our possessions and the things we own shouldn't be number one, that's okay, because we will still always have God in our life. Okay, that was a lot of lessons, a lot of things to learn about today. I hope and pray that you guys will store up your treasure in heaven and not just here on earth, and that you will live for your time in heaven and in eternity, telling others about him so that they can also spend forever in heaven with him, and growing in your relationship with God and growing in the fruits of the Spirit and all of these different things. So thanks again for joining. Don't forget to send in your photos for Chalk Walk this week, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.